We are in the midst of a truce that's been extended for a short period around the situation in Gaza. There has been prisoner exchanges, and I wanted to know from your perspective first, why did this occur now, and how does this reflect upon, especially Israel's stated goals? From the very beginning, after the October 7th raid, Israel was very clear, the entire cabinet, Netanyahu, very clear that the goal was to supposedly eradicate Hamas. And then, of course, we've seen what happened afterward, the massive toll on civilians, 20,000, I believe now, Palestinians killed, nearly 8,000 children, or about 8,000 plus children. So why now? Why did this occur? And how does it reflect on these goals and how it's going in particular for Israel?
Okay. Well, I think the most important thing is that in nearly all the discussions about why this happened, why 7th of October actually took place, and therefore what it lies behind it, for both of sides in this conflict, we do have to put some context into it. And it's really important, this context, and is almost entirely missing from the Western media. And that is that at the end of last year, there was a radical change in Israel. I mean, really radical. We were watching it. My wife, who's worked with the Palestinians for years and speaks Arabic, and suddenly she said, "Hey, look at this. All the Mizrahi are going into the Prime Minister's office." Well, for your audience to say, the Mizrahi are Jews who come either from the Arab states, the Middle East, West Asia, or from North Africa. And they tend to be regarded as a sort of underclass in Israel, have been regarded as an underclass against the European Ashkenazi, who are mostly secular and quite often leftist, and who live in Tel Aviv and Herzliya and so on. And the Mizrahi have always been the underdogs. And then suddenly, at the end of last year, we saw them take power. They won a majority in the parliament and were the formal government, a government that is a coalition one led by Netanyahu. But the main point was, for the first time, they said, we've tried, we win elections, but we never seem to get into office. And now they are in office, and they have a very radical program, because what they say, and the elements of it, there's the settler movement, and then the radical religious movement, and Orthodox together. And one of their first points is they say, we intend to re-establish Israel on the land of Israel. On the land of Israel, which is ill-defined, but Greater Israel extends right up into part of Lebanon and right down into part of Egypt and other way. In other words, establishing it on the West Bank, on Gaza, just to be absolutely plain, it would end the Palestinian people and end the Palestinian statehood project completely. So that was one of their main priorities and remains one of their main priorities. And the second priority, which is not formally that of the government, but which is that of several of the cabinet ministers like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and other ones in the cabinet, is essentially to build the third temple on Temple Mount, Haram al-Sharif. Now, the point about this is that this has been a movement that's been going on for a long time. I remember it when many years ago I was lent by the European Union to the American administration and Senator Mitchell to investigate the causes of the Second Intifada. And of course, the Second Intifada started with Ariel Sharon, the Prime Minister, going on the Temple Mount and into Al-Aqsa. And that started a rage, if you like, within the Palestinian community. Now, what has happened since? When I was there 20 years ago, when this was first happening, the sort of religious nationalism was precisely what Ariel Sharon was trying to foment. He was trying to bring about a birth of this sort of new religious nationalism. And the second thing was that at that time, the Temple Mount movement was tiny, fill in a few minibuses. It was nothing very significant. Now they have seats in the cabinet. Now the settlers have a stronghold over the government policy. And they have begun the process of planning for establishing the third temple on Haram al-Sharif, Temple Mount, and building it. And they have already imported the 3 red heifers and all the things in cultural Judaism which are required to start the process of laying the foundation for this. But just to be again really clear, what building the third temple means is the demolition of Al-Aqsa. Now, Al-Aqsa is really the foremost symbol today of Islam. Sunni Islam, Shia Islam, not Palestinians particularly, the whole Islamic world, particularly, if I'm allowed to say that, since in fact the Saudi Arabia has largely emptied the original seat of it, Medina and Mecca, of any real sense of religious feeling or being. And they've demolished the Prophet's home, they've demolished the first mosque in which he preached. All of that has been demolished by the Saudis, who, with their Wahhabism, doesn't really allow it. So Al-Aqsa is really the centerpiece. And a few years ago, the Israelis and the Palestinians clashed. In Gaza, it was with Gaza. And all of this lit a fire. There were rockets going on Tel Aviv. It was, rather like it's been in this last month or so. And there was something new about it. Hamas defined this as the Al-Aqsa Intifada. Not Palestinian, not Hamas, but the Al-Aqsa Intifada, because the settlers had been and stormed into the Al-Aqsa again. And therefore, there was a huge response across the Islamic world to this. And it joined everyone together. Now, before 7th of October took place, we had the same. We had the settlers storming into Al-Aqsa. And it is clearly government policy, because just a month before, the Netanyahu government held a cabinet meeting in the tunnels immediately under Al-Aqsa and proclaimed, we are the landlords here. This is our sovereignty. And then the day before, or on the Friday, I think it was, before the 7th of October, the settlers again entered it with support now from the police, from the security that surrounds the Temple Mount, are now on the side of the settlers and encouraging the settlers with this project. So now, if you put all these things together, you can perhaps have some understanding of what's going on now. We have a very radical government under Netanyahu who want to establish Israel on the land of Israel, which means eradicating all the Palestinians' lands in Gaza and the West Bank and beyond, and also is intent on building the third temple. It would mean in very short terms, putting it bluntly, it means the end of the Palestinians, the end of the Palestinian project, their symbol of Islam eradicated, Al-Aqsa, and their lands taken from them. This would be complete defeat. And so what we have now, in fact, and what was going on, and what that Sinwar, who's an interesting person, was doing was creating, it wasn't just an attempt to go into or seize land in the Israeli near Gaza. It was an attempt to create a revolutionary moment. And if you want to look at it, I mean, we tend in the West to look at everything in terms of sort of mechanical rationality and instrumentalism. And so we talk about, whether there's a political solution now and whether the ceasefire is going to lead to a solution. But both sides are engaged in something quite different, which is, if you like, revolutionary politics. Because not only is Hamas trying to break, if you like, the paradigm, the whole point of this is since 48, the great catastrophe, Palestinian state has not got any nearer, it's got further and further and further until Netanyahu, over the last 10 years, has been quite happy to say, well, that's old news, it's history. No one cares about the Palestinian state anymore. And this was the paradigm he wanted to break. And in that context alone, it's multi-contextual, but in that context, of course, the Palestinian state is now right up on the front burner, having hardly been on the far at all during this period. So you have to contextualize it in the sense that it was an attempt to break the paradigm and to bring this back onto the front burner and change it. And yes, the means to do a revolutionary moment, if you're in a fenced off, if you like, camp, tend to be rather drastic. And it was a drastic attempt to break this this paradigm and to start it anew. Now, on the other side, because we need then to go to the other side, their plan is equally, if you like, revolutionary. It is to found Greater Israel. And that means removing the Arabs. Now, a lot is said about Netanyahu, particularly in the American press, because there's a big constituency that don't like him in the the reformist Jewish community in the United States. And so he's, regularly sort of suggested that he's not very clever and he's, doing things, he doesn't know what he's doing. And, this is the old danger that I always warn myself and others about, is don't underestimate your adversaries. Don't underestimate the sort of sense that, because he's projected in this way. I know him, and he's not a very nice person and character. He is narcissistic and everything that's said, but he's as wily as a fox, and he does have a strategy, and his strategy is twofold. The first part of Netanyahu's strategy, and that of the cabinet, incidentally, there's no divisions in this. The first part of the strategy is to rely on the overwhelming public opinion in Israel, Israeli public opinion, that Hamas must be absolutely crushed and Gaza too, and the hostages released. And those are the twin things. And incidentally, there was a poll taken this Friday, a few days ago, and taken by the Israeli Democracy Institute. And this showed that his judgment on this is correct. 90% of Israelis favor the complete annihilation of Hamas. Now, if you break it down slightly more, favor prioritizing the release of hostages over prioritizing going back to the military track immediately. But it's right. There's overwhelming majority. It was before, I saw about 86, it's now 90%. And the man who did the polling, he said there is absolutely no evidence on the basis of the polling we've done that anyone favors a ceasefire, or indeed even favors, or Israelis favor a political solution. For them at the moment, stability is only to be achieved by the annihilation of everything that Gaza has stood for, as they see it. So this is a very revolutionary, if you like, plan. And it's a dangerous one. I mean, both sides are courting danger. Of course, Hamas faces a huge, leviathan, military leviathan on the other side. But here, Israel is betting that the other fronts won't open. I mean the other fronts, I mean the front of the northern of Israel with Hezbollah. I mean what's happening in Iraq, what's happening in Syria, and what's happening in Yemen. And as important, what's happening in, if you like, on the West Bank, which is now really a tinderbox and could explode at any point. So I'm sorry for that rather lengthy explanation, but if you don't understand the context, what's happening doesn't really make a great deal of sense. If you understand the context of why we're having just time out and why it's likely not to be long lasting, you have to understand that both sides are seeing this as revolutionary politics rather than as instrumental politics.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.